Hey everyone, welcome to Young and Wifed Up. I am Ryan, and I'm here with my other co-host,
Jed. Hello.
and this is a Valentine's February husband's takeover of the regular Young and Wifed Up podcast. You will be seeing, this is the second time you've been hearing or seeing us, probably, if you are listening actively to the show, which you can listen on YouTube or other podcasts. We would like you to rate and review the podcast if you are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and any other podcast catcher you are consuming it on. Also, be sure to join the broader community and discussion of Young and Wifed Up, whether through the free Facebook group that you can join, or you can become a Patreon and sign up with their various tier levels, whether you want to be a, what's the smallest one? A bestie, all the way up to a queen, and our sister.
Sister's the middle one.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, yeah, here we go.
Thank you, Ryan, for that intro. We are back with our husbands. This is Gabby, and we are going to be doing an episode this week about marriage advice that is common or popular that a lot of us hear or have heard ourselves that our families personally ignore, or we have a different take on it, or we have some explanations about why we don't necessarily subscribe to that. So we're going to go through 5 different common phrases that are told to young married people. Let's start with a hot one, hot off the press. Happy wife, happy life. Marcella, Jed, what do you guys think about happy wife, happy life?
Want to go first?
Yeah, I feel like your answer is going to be a lot more in-depth than mine is because you have notes and I'm just going to wing it. Happy wife, happy life. So I think if you've listened to, really any fraction of our episodes, you would probably know why we disagree with this, because the house should not just cater to the wife's feelings, because nobody really can make decisions or base anything off of their feelings because our hearts are deceitful. And so to tell a husband that he has to live his life catering to his wife's feelings is not just bad for him, it's also bad for her. And it doesn't call her to a higher standard or a holier standard of living, which is submitting ourselves to Scripture and what the Lord asks of us, and not just how we feel in the moment and are we happy, because that's just very subjective. And we shouldn't be placing all of our eggs into the happy wife, happy life basket. That is my shortest answer.
Okay. Well, I have 7,000 points, so here we go. No, first point, I actually don't. I thought about this specific to my experience. I would say I would be lying to say I did not begin this marriage without having that thought in the back of my head, because I just wanted to avoid conflict. I just wanted to be happy. I just wanted to be the couple that everyone wanted to be. So just give her whatever she wanted very quickly I find out that it's actually not working. So imagine if you're a manager and you have employees, and the employees are just manager, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do. But when the manager tries to lead them, the employees don't actually lead, or even vice versa.
They don't follow.
The manager says, just go work however you guys you want to work. Just will anything ever get done? And probably not. So only reason I bring that up is because there's got to be a leadership role. Somebody has to take a leadership role somewhere. Now, though we share that burden equally, at the end of the day, the hard decisions have to be made or deferred to somebody, and biblically that would be the man. So, and the first thing that I would mention is it's actually not leading you in any type of way. It's not really having an opinion. Having that, happy wife, happy life is not really, it's very passive. It's not having an opinion on anything. Just letting her do whatever she wants, spend however much money. And then the expectation that maybe she might be respectful, or she maybe will be able to better suit your needs as a husband, is going to be wildly incorrect. There's no communication happening. I've seen it time and time again where the husband's just whatever you want, babe, whatever you want, and the wife just throws her hands up because she needs help figuring out what she wants. She's not sure. She needs to talk through it. But the husband's just whatever you want, babe. I'm just here to write the checkbook. So it's not really approaching an issue together.
I think in some ways, like if the husband just gives the wife whatever she wants just to keep her happy, it really does backfire on him because she just ends up losing respect for him. Because then it just shows that, like, if I whine and cry about it enough, he will never stand up to me, even if I'm doing something wrong or sinful or that's hurting myself or our family or our marriage or anything. Like, as long as I cry about it enough, then he'll just kind of concede to me. And then I feel like a wife can sometimes think that that's what she wants, but it's obviously not is what's best for her. And it wasn't like, how God created us.
That
It's not
actually,
the natural order of
it
things.
flows directly into my last point of when I had that, I actually, below all that surface stuff, I actually felt less of a man when I was like, sure, babe, whatever you want. Happy wife. I actually felt less of a man. And it actually spilled over into other areas of my life where I wasn't able to take control. I didn't know how to take control when decisions had to be made with the person who was in control, right? I wasn't able to make that decision because I didn't know what it felt like to be in control. So it actually does affect other areas, I believe. And it's not a healthy relationship or expectation to have of somebody. You think of it, if you were to flip it to wives, happy husband, happy home. Well, it's gonna make you feel caged. It's gonna make you feel a certain way. It's negative. Like, it's just not gonna work. So why would it work the other direction?
Yeah, I like what you guys said. I think, like, in principle, I do think that if you do have a happy wife, you will have a happy life. But when people say that, they do mean, like what you guys are saying, like cater to all of her needs and feelings. She's always right. Don't contradict her, that sort of thing. But something that Marcella and I always encourage everybody in and each other in is that the wife truly sets the tone of the home with her attitude, and a wife has a lot of power in her attitude and disposition in her home and her family. And so we should take that upon ourselves instead of that advice being given to husbands as like, you need to just keep your wife happy. We should take that on. We need to be happy, joyful, content, and grateful. And we need to have the fruit of the Spirit ourselves so that the tone of our home is happy. And so I think that it's not a bad phrase, but it's poorly directed And it's always just like almost like an exasperated sigh that I hear a lot of older men that are husbands say when they're exasperated by their wife. They're like, oh, you know how it is. Happy wife, happy life. But it doesn't mean that their lives are happy. It just means that they have allowed their wife to take complete control of the household.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like everyone's, saying a lot and, agree, a lot that's being brought up. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because like, I don't know, for the episode, I was like trying to like look up like commonly what's like popular marriage advice. And like surprisingly, you'd probably see most people see the flaw in just even like secular, that doesn't quite make sense. But surprisingly, just in your common everyday experience, I feel like the tropes of like, it's almost like playing into and also really similar to the idea of like how pretty much a lot of people joke around saying the wife is the boss, or whatever, or, I got to run it by.
The pants. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of, playing into that somewhat. And yeah, it's more of like, even though most people can probably see the harm of it, that like a lot of times just naturally due to our own sinfulness, it plays out a lot just in our natural, like how we deal with things, whether like men, fighting off being passive and naturally giving into that, or women, with their sinful wanting, temptations of wanting to rule over their husbands. Like it's something that you can easily fall into and just become accepted. But yeah, I felt like, I don't know, Jed, you brought up a really good point about how like, you brought up the illustration of like at work, in a work situation, there's like, you have authority over your employees, or the boss does, and like it kind of gets to the idea that like leadership, which we obviously agree with and say the Bible teaches the husband is the leader of the home, in the head of the home and of the wife. And, like Westminster Larger Catechism says in the fifth commandment, there are superiors and inferiors in roles, and that the husband is in a superior role. So that like leadership is just tough. And sometimes being a good leader, like when you're supposed to lead for someone's good and not just their happiness at the moment. And sometimes making good leadership decisions causes tension. And sometimes, as a husband, you should be willing to embrace a situation where, I think, that my wife could, have a difficult time with this at first, but I do think this is the best thing for our family and we need to do this. And if I was just gauging it off of, well, I want to make sure she's happy, then, or how she's going to emotionally respond to it, then you would try and avoid that, like we brought up. But yeah, being a leader and a husband is hard, and loving your wife truly is being willing to engage in a situation where, she may not be happy in a situation, so, but there's obviously like, that doesn't mean that you like
Don't work to make her happy.
yeah, like your leadership, the goal is for their own good, and obviously like you do it with gentleness and care, and but we can't be ruled by a wife's emotions. So
Thanks, guys. Okay, so the next marriage, well, this is interesting. This is like a pre-marriage advice that all of us ignored, essentially. The advice is wait to get married until you are financially stable and or graduate college. Now, when I say all four of us ignored this, it didn't mean that we all started our marriages in an extremely impoverished or unwise circumstance, but that we all, and we can all agree here, made decisions when to get married based off of what we believed was essentially the lowest amount of means that our families could be provided for, but that we would not be destitute. And Ryan finished his college degree 3 months after we were married.
It's 2 months.
2 months.
Mm.
So he just quite made it.
Well, you can finish it.
Anyway, so the reason now, and we want to give caveats because I think that some people can go so far the other way with this advice and encourage people to get married in a circumstance that would be truly unwise and not prudent and not good for the couple at all. And that's why we should rely on people that are older and wiser than us and people that we trust, that know the both of you, know the circumstance, that have the same worldview as you and the goal of like a biblical marriage in mind. So yeah, I think that this is something that all of us have happily ignored. And because financial stability is honestly really relative in a lot of ways, and all of us lived in dingy apartments in our first years of marriage. We were 2-income households for a while. You know, there was a lot at play. And yeah, Ryan, you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I don't know. You know, I feel like in a way I can kind of get like the temptation in a sense. I don't know. Maybe like speaking from a husband perspective, like it can sound appealing that like if I would have started our dating process like a lot more put together and like, you know, I had a lot together, like, you know, like in a way, like you could think about like, oh wow, that yeah, it would have been like a lot easier in some ways and we wouldn't have, you know, there wouldn't have been as many challenges or whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, marriage is a good thing. And there's like, I don't know, it's a good for ourselves. And we shouldn't, I don't know, just the reality of the matter is that like, I don't know, it takes a while to be established and you shouldn't put off marriage until you're established because that can get you, especially if you're already in a relationship, you know, and you've matched with someone you really do believe that, you know, you would have a good marriage with and you want to, you know, become married and live together for the glory of God. Like, you know, being perpetually dating is just not good, you know? So marriage is a good thing and like you should pursue it and we should pursue it, you know, even early just because there's like, like marriage as a good of society, like there's aspects of like, you know, marriage is a blessing because it, provides like, an outlet, you know, for the good desires that we have. Like we're made to want to, you know, be with a husband and wife. And then also like, you know, the goal of, you know, raising children and being fruitful and multiplying is a good that you should be involved in. But um, I guess just a few things. I feel like I don't know, not being as to the point as I'd like to be. But two things is that like it can be good for a relationship, even though it's tempting to feel like, I don't know, that like, I mean, in a lot of ways, I've gotten to a better place than I was when I've gotten married. But it's also foolish for me to think that it's like a part of that is because I've had a supportive wife with me this whole time. And like that's aided in me being able to get to the place that I am. So it's a little bit foolish for me to think like, oh, I wish I was in this place, you know, right away. But I've been so blessed and helped by having a wife this whole time that like, you know, it doesn't really work like that.
Yeah, if we had waited until you had a job to where I could be home full time or these ideals that we like want for our family and good biblical things that we wanted, if we had waited till then, like that would have been unwise for us. It was a good and wise thing for us to get married when we did, even though we didn't have like this picture perfect situation. You know?
And I guess like, I don't, it's just the nature of things that it's like you have to grow into becoming a better man and husband and being able to provide more. And that just doesn't come quick. So there's just the reality that like young couples, like, you know, just struggle at first and like it takes a while.
Most
And
of
I
the
guess
time. Yeah.
maybe the one thing that it would be really cool to see our society embrace that more by like, I don't know, when we've been in Utah, because we live in Nevada, sometimes we visit Utah. I always notice like when we're driving around somewhere and I see like there's a apartment complex for married students.
Mhm.
And it's just interesting that it's like, and I imagine there's probably somewhat of like it's probably maybe a lower rate or something. And it's recognizing the good of marriage and promoting that you should get married. You shouldn't delay this. And like, there's also recognizing the reality that like it can be difficult and our society is trying to, in that particular cultures may try to promote that and encourage that by, giving helps to that, because ultimately that's going to better our, society by having more marriages and, so I don't know.
Marcella, Jed, do you have anything to add?
As far as waiting to get married, so let me preface that with, so there's always going to be a debate of when to get married, but I don't think there's going to be a debate of you're getting married too early. Like you may never be ready for marriage, but there's definitely, I think most people can attest, there's definitely a time when you shouldn't get married. Like if you're still living at home with your parents and you're still working your part-time job and you're playing video games, and or you're lazy, you don't have a direction in life, you don't have any aspirations, you're just 21, right? You're just kind of there. That's probably not a time to get married because you haven't even figured out you yet. But like I agree with what you guys were saying. I mean, if you guys waited until Ryan was uh, fully working in a job that he was able to provide for a house and a wife and himself, all on one income, you guys' life might look very, very different. So I think there's definitely a wrong time to get married, but the time when is always going to be up for debate. Just because I think it might be different for every person. Personally speaking, I do it over again in the same timeline. I see benefits of getting married young, and having children young, especially even when you're as young as we were still somewhat formidable in our years. Being young, we were still new to the world of just everything. So it was easier for us to kind of learn with each other and kind of like, hey, am I understanding this right? I'm kind of seeing this, insert whatever subject you want as this, and you kind of had a built-in best friend right then and there to kind of help you develop your own world. And through that, actually, it was very easy for us to surround ourselves with adults that were able to certify our understanding. Wise adults, from the church, from friends to family, they were able to say, yeah, you guys are actually right. Like, yeah, there's always going to be a time when you guys could get married, but you guys are definitely mature enough to get married now and be okay. You're going to learn a lot. You guys know each other. You know yourselves enough to run a home. You guys aren't lazy. You're not going to be living in a shoebox for a time. Like you guys have some foundation under your feet. That was our situation, and I would do it over again in a heartbeat like that. So Yeah, I saw the value in getting married young. Is I got to learn life with somebody. Whereas, let's say I went the other route, she or I might have gone impatient with one another and said, "Oh, I want this now. I feel like we could
Mm.
be a successful relationship now. We don't need all those exterior house, a job, what have you, investments ready to receive a wife. Um, like we might not be together had we waited until I had all those ducks in a row. The other thing that you have to also have to think that is life changes you, so you might be a completely different person once you get those ducks in a row, and you might want something completely different. Let's say I was able to get all those ducks in a row and say, actually, I can do all this on my own. I don't need a wife. Then we're kind of drawing into a well, okay, that means you're not going to these three sons that we wouldn't have this home that we have, this where we're at in our life would look very very different. I might become selfish, or I would be a completely different person had I waited until I had all those ducks in a row. What kind of person that would be, good or bad?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But anything to add?
Um, yeah, I do agree that there can be a wrong time or a bad time to get, or even a wrong or a bad person to get married to. And that is, I mean, that's pretty subjective. Like that is definitely something that you have to have other people involved in the situation, because especially when you are in a romantic dating relationship, you have to be aware that you are going to have blinders with certain things, and that you will not be able to see things that other people maybe outside of
Mhm.
the relationship will be able to counsel you about. And um and a lot of the time, like, we also have to think, like, even if, you know, as a woman, if you are dating somebody, you're wanting to get married, and maybe they are still living at home with their parents and they have a part-time job and they're not like in this at their peak, essentially. You are at that point, if your relationship at that point is glorifying to the Lord, you both desire marriage, you are both wanting to walk in that same direction side by side, then you are essentially marrying for potential. Because obviously, if I ever thought that if I wanted to start a home and a family with Jed, that, well, what he has now is all he's going to have to offer me. It's like, no, I saw his character, his work ethic, his integrity, all of these things that it's like, okay, I know that with these things, there is potential for growing in these areas in order for us to both fulfill our duties better, with him providing for our home, for us, having children eventually, I mean, we both talked extensively about what would that look like, what do we want in the future. And even though, like you guys were saying, it wasn't an ideal situation right at the start, because we knew each other's character, our, like, obviously our foundation was on scripture, our worldview and everything aligned, that we're marrying each other for the potential of where we're going to be going, not necessarily for what we have to offer each other now.
Mhm.
And I do think it should be more normalized that um that it is more than likely going to be kind of tough for a little while at the beginning, like you guys were saying. And, obviously, hopefully not to the point where, you guys are living on the streets and you can't eat. And it's like, obviously, there has to be some provision of basic necessities. And we obviously trust the Lord for him to provide those things. But
Mhm.
we have responsibilities, we can't be lazy,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. If you don't work, you don't eat. And I think we have normalized too much, like, that people use that phrase, like, well, I want to be more financially settled. I think the majority of the time people are using that as a cop out, because they have a very specific lifestyle in
Mhm.
their head of what they want. When they get married, it's because we want our lives to be a certain way right off the bat because maybe it's embarrassing if we don't. All of our peers have this, it's like a keeping up with the Joneses sort of a thing. And I think there are circumstances where it's like the minority of cases of where it would not be prudent for us to get married because of like some serious financial stuff that needs to be figured out. That is really rarely ever the case. I feel like for the most part, normal functioning adults who get married will be able to live together and provide for the basic needs, even if they don't have the nicest things or live in the nicest house or whatever it is. So
But you're also able to grow with each other.
yeah. And I like what Ryan said, where it's like, okay, is the one of the reasons why I'm at where I'm at is because I got married. And because would I have actually been able to get this far or accomplish this on my own? We really don't know, but he obviously attributes like the valued companionship of Gabriella and the support of her really helped push him towards, these things that he has been able to accomplish now at this point in his life.
Yeah, it's easy. When we first got married, my friends my age were very frivolous spending. They would spend very just frivolously and what's that word, like just on a whim, whenever they wanted, on whatever they wanted, and then they would be crunching pennies until paycheck.
Pinching pennies.
Did I say crunching?
Yeah.
Pinching pennies until paycheck. I was at least able to recognize very early, well, we're not bringing in as much. I still have to pay rent with this other girl that I'm living with, this other person I'm living with, and I can't afford this check. Yeah, like I can't afford to just go spend whatever I want. And I don't know. For me, at least, it brought very much into perspective what kind of lifestyle I wanted versus the lifestyle that I currently have and the necessary sacrifices that I have to make day to day, day in, day out for that lifestyle to still keep a roof over my head. Because all these other people, they were living with their parents. They didn't really have to worry about a roof being taken away or a car being taken away or anything like that. We actually had a legit fear, like if we don't pay bills, we will not eat. And we will not have a roof over our head. So the cost was greater to us for frivolous spending, which forced us to grow up much sooner. And the important stuff, nicer things, quickly faded away.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I don't care for a Gucci bag. Just give me a rat and tattered backpack that I can take to work. Like,
the mentality changes when you're no longer just responsible for yourself. Like when you are responsible for others, you really do have to grow up and realize that like all of the nice things were just like, this is just not important. It's really
and it doesn't change your lifestyle.
No.
Gucci shoes are still walking the same sidewalk as
in Gucci.
You
have a thing for Gucci?
I have an obsession of hate towards Gucci because their marketing sucks. Anyways, moving on.
Okay, guys. So, sorry, Ryan has further thoughts, I guess.
No, you guys brought up a lot of good points, and you did as well bring the nuance with there's a time not to get married. I appreciated that. I guess, I felt like summarizing some of what you said, because it was really good, is like that the good of marriage and all of the good things that it brings is worth more than like greater excess or material things that you could have without the sacrifices it brings. And I guess, I don't know, I felt like I was struggling a lot making my point, and one thing I felt like to better say what I was trying to say is that you should get a helpmate sooner than later, because a wife really is a blessing and helps you accomplish, your goals and, what God's called you to do in your life. And a wife helps you to do that. And you should get that blessing and help if you can, sooner.
And women, You should vet the man that you are willing to be a helpmate for. The man that has a vision, are you willing to support his vision for the rest of your life and his life? Which brings us to our next question, which is a lot of these points honestly carry over into the next question or the next piece of advice. And interestingly, Ryan and I, even though we do not currently have living children, this is advice that we also ignored, even though there wasn't any fruit of it because of the Lord's providence. He did not allow us to have children early in our marriage. And, we still don't have a living child, and we're on our 7th year of marriage. But when we were dating and engaged, we did not take the position that when we got married, we should wait. I always hear people say, wait at least 3 to 5 years. And that is common advice, even among Christian people. Yeah. It actually, especially sadly, among Christian people, is when you get married, people have, and I'm sure you guys heard the same things, when you're young and you're getting married, it's like, well, make sure, you guys got to get to know each other, and you guys get at least 3-5 years. You got to have like some margin here. And not that I don't think that there are times where there would be wisdom in spacing or delaying children, but that usually the advice given to young people is it's almost like, if you don't want to have children with this person, maybe you shouldn't get married to them.
Mhm.
Like if while you're dating and you're engaged, you're thinking, I don't know, I really love this person and I really like these things about them, but I don't know if I could see them being a father to my children, or a mother to my children. It's like, then you should that's probably a red flag. When you get married and you start a family, there is an assumption when you are starting a family that you are not only open and willing, but you want to have children with the person that you are getting married to. And like I said before, I want to make sure it's very clear. I do think that there are circumstances where it is wise to delay or space children. But a lot of the advice that's thrown around willy-nilly is mostly worldly surface advice. And Ryan and I, when we got married, people were telling us, you guys aren't going to have kids right away, right? And both of us would say, we're allowing the Lord to decide. And I mean, almost 7 years later, we're saying the same thing. The Lord decides when to open and close the womb. We have had that same resolve since the day we got married, and we will continue to. And I don't know. I just think that this is something that we should, before we throw out those kind of, especially when we become older and we become the older people giving advice to young married people, we should really think about, is this a good thing to say to a young couple that's getting married? I think that when you are vetting somebody to marry, you are deciding to have children with that person. Do you have any thoughts before we pass it on to the Chathams?
No. Well, I mean, yeah, a little bit.
No.
You made a lot of good points. I don't know. I feel like, in a way, kind of like touching on some of what we've already talked about, but like that, in a way, like marriage is already a getting outside of yourself experience. Like, choosing to not continue to only just focus on yourself, but growing by taking care of someone else. And then like having children is like a further extension of that, to get out of yourself even more. By now, the both of you are responsible, for a human being and raising them. So I mean, it's like, it's another thing to where that's a challenge and that's a sacrifice. And, to take care of another human being. So like then it kind of comes to the same, maybe there's similar things that people wrestle with just getting married in the first place, with also deciding to have kids, like some of the same motivations, because it's more struggle, it's more sacrifice, but ultimately, you can see that it is a great good and blessing, and it should be sought after. um yeah, and I guess I would just say that like I was really thankful. The pastor who married us, he gave this really great sermon. I regret every day that I didn't record it. But he just like taught on, it was the sermon was on Psalm 128, and it's just like, it's just obvious from God's creation that it's natural that when you're a husband and wife, that under normal circumstances, that you do naturally produce children, and that's a blessing and that's a good thing, and you should want that. And it's just like, it's what goes along with getting married. It's a duty of marriage, to be pursuing that. And like, I guess in our culture, it's so emphasized to try and tell you that you have control over that, or to actively fight against it, to exercise, your freedom in that. And of course, like there is, like Gabrielle had mentioned, there are things to think about, and there are ways and means to go about being wise and certain biblical decisions. But ordinarily, you should be pursuing fruitfulness. But and also, just as like from our perspective for people, and especially combating this, is that like, if you kind of give in to the society's lie of that you have so much control of whether you're going, when you decide when you're going to have kids, like take it from our perspective that like you might come to realize that things don't always just go perfectly because of the realities of sin, and just the fall in our life, that things are messed up, and things don't always go that. And if you tell yourself, well, we'll get to this certain point, and then things are just going to go great, and then we'll finally have kids, you may start to encounter a lot of challenges, and then realize, wait, like I thought I could now, and now it's not happening. And I don't know, it's just
Marcella, Judd, you guys have 3 children, and neither of you are 30 yet. So,
yeah. Yeah, it is really okay. So I have been on kind of both sides of this, because to be completely transparent, when Judd and I first got married, we kind of took on this perspective of, well, we're going to wait, a few years. And then, of course, we saw much sooner than we thought we were going to, that actually, I think, we should stop trying to control this, and that it would be good for us to have children. So we ended up having children a lot sooner than when we first planned to, when we first got married. And if I hadn't miscarried our first, we would have had children even sooner than when we had Seth, who's now 5, our oldest. And so at one point when we were very first married, we adopted this, I would say now would be a lie, that we should, have been waiting, so many, and it was almost like this like floating goal that you have. Like, most people can't really tell you and pinpoint what exactly needs to happen in order for them to feel quote unquote comfortable enough to start having children. They just kind of say, like, I don't know, we just don't feel ready. And it's like, okay, well, what will it entail for you to be ready? I don't know. We just like don't really,
The timeline is very generalized.
it's very vague, for the most part. Like, and I've had so many conversations with like various women. I know Gabriella has too, just in various circumstances, even just like in peer conversations and like counseling situations, and like it, for the most part, it's usually very vague. And I think a big part of this is because our society has removed or has disconnected sex from procreation. That plays such a huge part into why do we think that somehow having children is a bigger commitment to somebody than making a covenant with them and entering into marriage with them. So we like, you see so many people, well, marrying somebody, like, well, yeah, like, sure, we're entering into a commitment. I don't think they would see it as a covenant. But as soon as you put kids into the picture, it's like, oh, okay, now we're really committing to each other. So it's like there's already like a lowering view of marriage to begin with, because for the most part, people think like, well, if it doesn't work out, we can just get divorced. And there's an easy way out of that. But when you have kids with somebody, it kind of ups the ante for everybody. So it like there's kind of this ripple effect of, for one, we have a low view of marriage to begin with and the commitment that entails literally for life. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, well, the natural consequence of being married is going to be children in the right order of things. And so when there's that much of a separation, like, of course, like, you're going to have a lot of married couples who could absolutely have children right away and decide to take the approach, well, 3 to 5 years, and well, I want to travel more and we want to see the world and we want to get to know each other. And I always tell people, like, what really helped Jed and I get to know each other was having a baby together. Like, you really want to get to know somebody, have a kid with them. Like, that will definitely help quite a lot. And I like what you said, Gabriella, that like, if you don't feel like you know somebody enough to have children with them, you should not be marrying them in the first place, because they have to go hand in hand. And because we've disconnected those two things so much, because of the sexual revolution, that it's easy for us to like throw out all these excuses to delay for really petty and silly purposes, honestly, is what it comes down to in my eyes. And so, yeah, obviously there are always going to be exceptions to the rule, but the exceptions are what make the rule. And we shouldn't, especially as Christians, if we know the Lord tells us that children are a blessing, we shouldn't go with the exceptions of, well, there are some circumstances where it wouldn't be wise or prudent for, like, this newly married couple to have children. That is generally not probably going to be the case for most people. And obviously it will always come back to, you need to have older, wiser Christians, elders who care about you, who can counsel you in these situations. If there is actually something legitimate that you're like, we know this is something we should desire, we want children, we do desire it, but there are these like extenuating circumstances, we just really don't think it would be wise. And yeah, having elders who can help you work through that biblically is just going to be gold for you. So
I think with having kids, coming from the men perspective, why a lot of younger men my age don't want kids, or like immediately out the gate, or even maybe marriage until later on, is they don't want to feel like they're not prepared for a commitment or a life-changing event like that, which is a very real fear. But that's the whole point of trusting in God, is, yeah, you're not going to feel prepared. You might read all the books and you might do all the steps that you think you should do to feel prepared, and guess what? You probably still won't feel prepared enough. You will still feel insecure about XYZ, whatever it is. Even with Seth when we were like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have a baby. Only 2-3 years in.
I think I got pregnant a year and a half.
Yeah.
Because I was 22 when I had him. I think.
Probably, yeah. So pregnant with a baby boy along the way. I'm working a distribution center job, a warehouse job. She's working as a
I'm
music
still
teacher.
working. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm like, we're not ready to bring in a kid. We're still kids. And I feel so unprepared. You talk about wanting to run and hide, man, but that's the whole point is you can't. You can't run and hide. You have now
to step
two
up.
souls depending on you to step up or show out. You got to show up or show out, period, straight up. So I didn't have a choice. And it was a good thing because I was forced to step out of my comfort zone. I was forced to address the elephant in the room, which was me, which was my insecurity and my not trusting God. Well, guess what? More kids don't change that. You don't have one kid but all right, finally trusting God. No, it actually gets harder with each kid to trust in God because those bills pile up. Those real fears actually do come to fruition. What?
I was just gonna say really quick on the bills piling up. It's so funny
Oh,
to
yeah.
me when I see these articles that are like, the average expense for a baby per year is $20,000, and I'm like, what are you spending money on? Have you guys seen those articles? It is absolutely absurd. And I'm like, okay, if you're buying the newest, latest, and greatest technology of all of these things, yeah, you're probably going to rack up a pretty hefty credit card bill, but it is not going to cost you $20,000
Yeah.
to keep a baby alive for a year.
Well,
Whoever's telling you that is lying to you.
well, going to the whole bills part, I mean, that's it gets more serious for the men. If you're not already established and you don't have a drive like, hey, this is what I need to do, the kids will put a microscope. Microscope? Is that word? Not microscope. That's
A
what you use.
magnifying glass.
Magnifying glass. That's what you put on a rifle. Yeah.
So too, I guess.
Yeah. It puts a magnifying glass onto you, as does actually marriage. Both of them put a magnifying glass onto you and your capability. So yes, marriage and kids should scare you. They're not to be taken lightly. Those people are not accessories. It's not a little like check mark on your resume. Like it's something to take very seriously. And sex is a great benefit of marriage, but it also carries a ton of weight in both context systems. So my thing, I mean, we say all the time like Liam was a happy surprise. Like wasn't planned. But at the same time, we were living with her parents and she was actually taking less and less students because it was getting more and more overwhelming to have two toddlers and to be working.
Well, and I think at that point we already knew we were going to be moving. And so it didn't make sense for me to keep
right.
building.
But still, I was still working.
I mean, the Lord provided.
I was still working, and when she told me, I was like, snap. Okay. Well, we're not prepared for this at all. And that really put again a magnifying glass on myself of not to trust in my own accord and my own strength, but to really trust back in the Lord. Which again, it having kids and having a wife changes you because you can read every book, you can go to every therapy session, you could talk to every pastor, and I guarantee you will still have that void in your self that this is not right. Something's not right about this. I'm still missing something, but I feel like the moment I was like, God, I don't know what I'm doing. I truly don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I'm supposed to be for these people. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, or I don't know where I'm supposed to go. Like, I don't know. The moment I kind of laid that honestly down and I need help. Not just for what I want, but I need help to figure out who I want to be for these people and how to lead them. That was where the picture came to life, and I was, it just was shouted and internally of you just need to trust and take it day by day, and God will figure it out. And it's
the Lord always provided just above and beyond,
which is
what
good
we ever needed,
because it takes off it takes the intention off myself. When I just want to wait until I'm prepared. You're still putting the spotlight on yourself.
Yeah,
You're
still
still-
relying on your own.
You're still relying
strength.
on your own strength. But the second that you say, I'm never going to be prepared, I'm going to have these new doubts or new fears or new objections to XYZ. Is you're fighting yourself in that situation. So
It's so funny. Even though we don't have any living little ones, when we got pregnant with Eden, who's in heaven last year, Ryan and I had been trying to get pregnant for almost 6 years. And if anybody was more prepared, it was us, it's like we got pregnant and everybody would probably all agree they're prepared to be parents. But Ryan was like, we were acting like we were teens. Like Ryan was like spiraling, and it's like,
It's scary. It's scary. Like, yeah, even
it's like, how are we going to pay for this? And I'm like, Ryan, you have a good job. What are you talking? Like,
I've never said that.
No, but like you were like, we need to figure out.
That's not what I'm afraid of.
wrong
No, I
next
am.
Right.
I am.
Well, yeah, we were like trying to like move budget around and how are we going to pay for a birth and how are we going to do this? And it's like everybody could look at our lives and be like the peacocks. They've been prepared for a long time. They've been trying to get pregnant for a long time. But even we, like panic mode set in of like, we are going to have to be parents. Like this is nuts. Like, and Ryan is 30, I'm almost 30, or you're 31, sorry. And when we got pregnant, you were 30 still. And it's like, we were in the perfect, according to the world, and even a lot of Christians, we were in the perfect window of time. We've been married for a long time to feel prepared. And we were like, okay, Lord, you're going to have to help us, and I imagine, Lord willing, we get pregnant again. We're gonna have struggle with those same feelings because like you said, Jed, there is a weight to caring for another soul. There is. It's just like, and it should be weighty. And I like what you said, Jed, like the consequence, the blessing of sex is there's something that comes with that. And we need to be willing to accept that. And it's like when we separate it, there's so much turmoil, and we see it in our world when we separate children from sex, when we separate procreation from sex. We are killing children in our world because of this, and so we could talk about this for hours, but we should move on.
Next question.
Sorry, Ryan has one more thought apparently.
I guess one thing, going back on when Marcella, you had brought up like people saying kids overemphasizing the expense that kids can bring and making it sound like it's this ridiculous thing. I remember one time talking to coworkers back when I worked with actual people, that like they agreed, and I was asking them, I just asked them questions like, how, like, you have kids, like, how much is it, like, and they, like a handful of people said the biggest expense is daycare.
Yep.
That's the real.
Let's let that sit in for a little.
Ladies, save your money and stay home. You really don't want it to cost that much. I mean, yeah.
And they're always sick.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're gonna.
We would always like. Sorry, we would always hear from my turn. We would always hear from people like, okay, the kids are in daycare, but then they're always sick. But then there's like no refund for all the days that they're out sick from daycare. And so they're still, and then the parents still have to take off work anyway in order to be home with the sick kids.
So it's just lost money.
It's literally, I just don't.
It doesn't even weigh out. It's just.
I just don't.
Yeah.
If you can.
Save your money, man.
Yeah. It's just better all around.
All right, moving on.
Generally.
Okay, we're going to cram these last two cliches together so that we can wrap this 2-hour episode up. The first cliche is marriage should be 50-50. And the next one is never go to bed angry. And I'll be brief. I said before a couple episodes ago that the work of a wife and the work of a husband cannot be equally measured. They are different. We have different roles, different duties. And if the second we try to compete with each other or compare hours worked or labor or emotional labor, it never ends well. And then I hear another one, well, everybody should be giving 100, 100. Well, who's to say what's 100? Who's to say what's 70? Who's to say what's 50? A lot of it is so relative. So I think the better thing, in my opinion, that Ryan and I strive for is we do our duties heartily unto the Lord and we cover each other's weaknesses like we do. It's like if there are days where I cannot give my 100 or my 50 or whatever, my husband steps in and does the 100 or the 50. And if he's down, I'm stepping up to cover the 100 or 50. Like marriage isn't 50-50. Marriage isn't measurable. It's not a competition. It's a covenant. And I think that when we start measuring things and counting each other's work, it never ends well. And then I also, to touch on the never go to bed angry, I understand the sentiment. And I think some of it is coming from a scripture. You could probably tell me what it is, Ryan, that says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. I think it's a proverb.
Psalm 4.
Psalm 4. I think that the principle in itself is good, that you shouldn't allow sin to fester in your soul, that you should deal with it. You should deal with your sin so that you are not going to bed angry. But when people say that, they usually mean duke it out until the wee hours of the night and don't go to bed angry. And I have noticed with us that sometimes taking a break, praying, and then deciding when we are going to come back together and readdress the issue or the conflict, that usually it does go better once we've separated our emotions from it. And so there have been times where it was a wise thing for us to go to bed and to get sleep and to revisit the conversation the next day or the following day. But that I do still think that the sentiment in itself of, don't let the sun go down on your anger, which is scriptural, is good. And I think it's more talking about your own sin. Like, do not let your rage grow so much in your heart that you're going to bed enraged and you are indulging in sin. That you should go before the Lord, put your emotions before the Lord, and then revisit. Brian?
Sorry, I guess the verse is
Ephesians.
Ephesians 4:26. Be ye angry and sin not, which is from Psalm 4. But then let not the sun go down upon your wrath. I guess I feel like you said, I liked what you had said for the 50-50 thing. I guess I feel like sometimes I have heard people say, like, oh, are you guys splitting all the duties, in marriage or the household, 50-50, making sure everything's fair, and I feel like that's a pretty egalitarian way to think about things and kind of doesn't recognize the different roles that a husband and wife has, and that there are certain things that more or less fall under the responsibilities and domains of one another that they should take care of, primarily a husband to provide and work, and a wife to manage the things of the household. Not to say that there's, not room for helping one another, but yeah, and never go to bed angry. I guess, I have heard, I guess the obvious thing is like, yeah, sometimes when there's like a conflict, and especially if things have heated up to the point, it's like, yeah, sometimes the worst thing could be trying to figure everything out when it's already late, but you're thinking you're trying to follow this principle of we have to completely settle this right now, and that's just going to make things difficult. And by, actually going to sleep and, taking care of yourself, you might actually come to a more sober perspective about things that have been happening. But I feel like one thing to say is I felt like I heard someone emphasize this, that there is, in a sense, that like if some big conflict has happened and you're angry towards one another, there's a certain sense in which like you should try to very quickly do what you can to remedy the situation, to especially if you recognize that you've sinned yourself, you should seek to make that right as quick as you can, and you should take care of it quickly. But I don't know, I guess like I would just say that you really should do everything you can do to even if there's a big conflict that's happening and it's really late at night, the best thing that could probably do is to go to one another and say things have gotten really tense and heated up. I don't want this for us. If you've sinned, apologize and confess your sin and ask for forgiveness and say this is probably going to take a while to work through whatever needs to be dealt with. Why don't we make it a point to go to sleep, take care of ourselves and make it a point to deal with this tomorrow at a specific time. Don't avoid it, but because it's just going to make things worse if you try to tackle some big subject while you're super tired and you're already heated up. But yeah.
Marcella, Jed, what about marriage should be
No, I think Jed and I had a conversation about this earlier because we knew we were going to be talking about it tonight, and I think it could get too much into the territory of you really end up splitting hairs with each other if you really are trying to make sure it's all fair and equal. And like Ryan was saying, that's a very egalitarian way of going about things. And you really can't compare or measure the different things and duties that people, that a husband and wife have to take care of. And sometimes things fall through the cracks. Sometimes there's illness, sometimes there's pregnancy or postpartum. Those are the probably some of the biggest extenuating circumstances I can think of where I may be physically incapacitated, literally, that I can't do what I'm normally able to do in the home, where because he loves me, he's going to, and also he knows that these things have to be done in the house, that he's going to step up and take care of those things. But the general rule of thumb for me when it comes to I talk a lot about the house stuff because I feel like that's usually the main topic people are talking about when it comes to, are you guys sharing the load? For the most part, the keeping of the home, it's going to fall on my shoulders. Now, if Jed is willing and able to fill in the cracks for me, when he can, to me, that's a kindness to me. That's not something he's obligated to do. And I feel like when women, when wives and mothers are in situations where they really can't take on a lot of housekeeping stuff, that's why I always give the advice of, do you have the energy to do the bare necessities? And for us, that's laundry, dishes, meals. Those people need clean clothes, people need to eat, and people need dishes to eat off of. And so those are the three things. And it's if you can't do anything else besides that, then that is what you have to take care of. And sometimes women can't do that because of things like being physically incapacitated. But I'm not going to like take on such a large load of homemaking things that the bare necessities are not getting done because I've taken on 5 different hobbies, and now my husband has to fill in the like necessity cracks, if that makes sense. And so yeah, and it can get a little bit dicier when you have both spouses working outside of the home, because then it's like, okay, what's the schedule? Who's home when? Children, and like how all that works out, like that would require a lot more communication, I feel like, than as opposed to our circumstance, which is like I'm at home full time and he's at work full time. And so in some ways, because of the circumstance that we're in, it does make it a bit easier to kind of draw the line, that this is very much I am manning my post and you're manning yours kind of a thing. And that's not to say like Jed every day almost every day, he is doing something around the house. If it's dishes, children, like whatever it is, even with us, that we approach marriage in this way, doesn't mean that Jed doesn't do anything around the house, because he still does. But that, in my eyes, is not like, that is not something that he owes me, if that makes sense. I don't think that is like we have like in a marriage, we have rights to certain things, and I don't have a right to like demand of my husband that he has to take, that we have to split down the middle things in the house 50-50. So yeah. And then as far as the never going to bed angry, that just like, I feel like we really tried that for for a little while when we were first married, and we
Do not work.
no, it really doesn't work for the most part. Productive conversations are rarely ever to be had after 11 p.m. in my experience. And
Conversations
so
were had when we were both tired, but we were like, we're not going to go to bed angry.
and
But we were just like, well, you made me feel this way.
This out.
It'd be 1 a.m. and I'm like, I gotta go to work in 3 hours. Can I leave?
I think please let me go to sleep, please. I think Ryan gave really good advice that if it is within your power to remedy the situation as quickly as possible, you have an obligation to do that, especially if like you're the one who sinned against the other. You have to like confess and make it better. But there are definitely situations where it's maybe a lot more complicated than that. Like maybe you both sinned against each other. Maybe there's just like some really difficult, complex thing that needs to be worked through. And truly, I don't think you can really figure it out wisely after a certain hour, because it's just like we're just mere human beings and we have physical needs and limitations, and we have to like keep that in mind. And I think also for like sometimes I found like there's usually one spouse who wants to keep talking and figuring it out, and then there's another spouse who really just wants to like maybe avoid the conflict or like just be done with the conversation. And so like the one who wants to continue the conversation, even if it's so late, it's like, insanely late, have mercy on your spouse and like let them go to bed. And like it's also a mercy on yourself too, because like what Ryan was saying, I think you end up coming to a much more sober perspective after you've been well rested and you've had a night's sleep. And I really think most of the time you will wake up the next morning and say, wow, the situation is not actually as bad as we thought it was. Like, I think the exhaustion can definitely
Trigger.
blow things out of proportion. So to be very careful with knowing your bodily weaknesses can absolutely impact, even spiritually, how you handle things like that, conflicts and things. So
Yeah, so I'll be brief with the 50-50 rule. I think I never really liked that rule. I just it's so like, what is this, a freaking resume and contractor? Like this is stupid. Like you guys are running a house. Things have to be done sometimes at the expense of the other person because one, they're not available or they're just too tired. You got to step up. Boo-hoo. Move on. Like it's not going to be I that stuff I don't mess around with because I've seen too much of it where wives or husbands will be petty in that way. Well, I changed the diapers, all week last week. Well, I went to work. I'm just like, the kid's sitting in poop. Who's going to change the diaper? Okay? Go do it. Like literally. And it's, you guys are laughing, but I've
No,
been
yeah.
around those people and
Yeah.
it's something's got to happen, and sometimes you got to be the one to catch the crap, literally. And sometimes things have to happen in a way where you have to sacrifice more, and you've already sacrificed. Sorry, it's life, it's marriage. Some days she fills in, some days I fill in. I would say also in terms of responsibilities around the house, sometimes a person's capacity and abilities match that issue or whatever it might be. It matches that objection much better than the other person. For a while, you were doing the budget for a bit because I was just, I'm not good with numbers. I'm not good with numbers. Eventually, it became an overwhelming aspect for her, and budget needed to be done. I couldn't expect her to keep on doing that on top of everything else. So Ryan, that's when I came to you. That was more of like okay, I have to learn how to do this. It's not even a preference anymore. Like I have to learn, whether I like it or not. And now I have a much better idea of the budget. It's one more thing off her plate, and I actually enjoy it. I would not have known that had it not been forced onto me, given the situation. Point blank. So in conclusion for that 50-50 rule, it's stupid. It's so stupid. I think, Gab, you hit it on the head in the beginning. You have your roles biblically and just relatively
Otherwise,
speaking,
yeah.
and otherwise, like those are your roles. But sometimes your role as the husband requires you to put on an apron and go bake. Sorry. And wife, sometimes it requires you to pick up a hammer and go hang a picture because the husband is too, like, seriously, like, just do what needs to be done.
That's what
You
it
don't
boils
need to
down
be,
to.
yeah, it doesn't need to be so cut dry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You guys, sometimes, okay, so Ryan was really, really sick a couple weeks ago, and I took out the trash for the first time, I think, in our entire marriage. And I really felt like I was bearing my cross that day.
The Reba theme song comes on.
A single mom who works 2 jobs, who loves her kids and never stops. That was me that day. I was like, this is the first time I've taken the trash out in our entire marriage. Guys, in our entire marriage. And I was like, wow, I really take this for granted. Like,
Yeah.
So I just had to throw that in there.
I think
That's good.
what Ryan said at one point is like, even if you have the things that there's in some ways an unspoken agreement, like you take care of this stuff, I'm going to take care of this stuff. That doesn't mean there's no room for spouses helping each other. And sometimes that's by means of like the husband's got to put on an apron and bake some bread for the week and figure that out.
Mhm.
And then other times it's like a husband asking his wife to take on a part-time job because they're in like a financially low, situation at that time. So it's like you also have to kind of be willing to
It's just
bend
there's
to be bendable.
there's
without
different
breaking.
sacrifices required of a different person at each time. I think the main thing that each person should see is there's an objective, there's a result that needs to be done or made, or like there's a path that needs to be done, right? How we get there is what do we got to do? What can we do as a teamwork to make this happen? And we both want to get there and starts from a desire for that issue to be resolved.
And you waste time if you're
just arguing. Well, it's yours. No, it's yours. Well, I did this last time. Well, it's just wasting time.
Yeah.
So the other thing, in terms of going to bed angry, 100%, you need to own it. If you if you are the offender, you need to own it straight up. Just swallow that dang pill. To the women listeners and to also the women who will tell their men, I am saying this all out of love. I promise you. Sometimes it's just better just to shut your mouth, right? As much as you want to react in that moment, if you know you can be emotional, sometimes it's better to just, I need to step away.
Yeah.
I need to remove myself. Many times I was exhausted and I just, and I blew up. And well, guess what? Now you just made the situation 10 times worse because now she's hurt, you're hurt, and now baby's awake and everyone's crying. Like, I think there's definitely needs to be a self-awareness of, am I being emotional right now? Does this really matter? And being able to communicate that, of, listen, I know you're tired. This thing that happened earlier actually did really hurt me, but I understand that you're not in a place to hear me. But I do need to get this addressed, right? That's confronting that issue responsibly and sacrificially and lovingly to the next person and giving them a chance. I'm okay with you sleeping in order for you to hear me, but we do need to talk about this straight up,
Yeah.
right? And
Coming back together.
right, it's good. It's getting back to community. I think that's something that I should have started way early on, is not to be so emotional and just fly off the handle and then apologize later. Like, be responsible, be self aware of yourself, and if you were the offending party, it is better just to straight up own it. And it sucks.
Swallow your pride.
It sucks sometimes. I'll be the first one to say that it sucks. But for the sake of coming back together and being one, for that sake alone, I'd be more willing to do that over than just being right. I hated that. Just, well, you're always right. I'm always wrong. Like, that just screams insecure little boy. Like, if I could have just, well, what about just you guys being together again? With just being one, being in peace.
Yeah,
like,
being in fellowship.
Being in fellowship. Just admit your own. Anyways, I can go on about that, but don't go to bed angry. I think that could be taken with a grain of salt.
Right. There's a time and a place, but it shouldn't be a hard and fast rule.
Yes.
Or that, like, don't go to bed angry, but that doesn't mean you have to completely solve the problem.
Right.
Right.
Okay, guys, we hope you enjoyed all of our hot takes on these popular marriage cliches and advice. And we will talk to you guys next week as we quiz each other on how well we know our spouses. Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.